Parole, when the system calls it rehabilitation. They called it rehabilitation 3 months after completing a 14 months of anger management for an August 2016 domestic assault. My son Kenley was dead. The warning signs were already there before my son was killed. Probation violations, drinking, disappearing, and ignoring rules. The system already knew there were anger problems and a pattern of violence. And now victims are told to trust parole system, build on classes, credits, and checklists. Really? In overwhelmed systems with crowded courts and prisons, families are often left wondering whether true accountability is being measured or simply compliance. Hi, I'm Sarah Rainey, also known as Mama Bear, from YouTube DUI Shatters Lives. My last video was about probation and the warning signs victims sometimes see before tragedy happens. This video is about parole and why so many victims fear what happens next. Because once you understand how parole really works, you realize something very painful. The system can begin focusing more on rehabilitation and earned credits, while victims like us are still living with permanent loss. What TV gets wrong, people think parole decisions are based only on the crime itself. Reality. In places like Texas, parole boards may also review program participation, educational classes, counseling, religious services, institutional behavior, work programs, rehabilitation efforts, conduct reports, constructive activity credits. Parole boards often look at things like, like I said, program participation, counseling, and credits. But the man who killed my son Kenley had already shown a pattern of violating probation. After disappearing for 6 months, he was still rewarded with a PR bond. Now he's rewarded with credits? Then he disappeared again for 3 months. The only reason another bond wasn't granted was because I showed up at his hearing. His grandmother even paid his first bond with her last savings, only to later notify the DA in writing she didn't know where he was. That's why victims fear repeated chances, because we've seen what happens when accountability is missing. So victims naturally wonder, can classes truly measure accountability? I say no. Can prison behavior erase past patterns? I say no. Can checklists predict future choice? No. Victims often don't learn about these things until parole is approaching, when it's too late. And many families are stunned because here's the difficult question victims are carrying. What happens when someone has a history of ignoring supervision outside prison walls? The man who killed my son, Kenley, had already shown a pattern of violating programs. He had already disappeared once. And then he was granted a PR bond, a personal reconnaissance bonds, where he didn't have to pay any money. Cash bond requires payment. Money posted, often through a bondsman. PR bond is a personal reconnaissance bond. No payment, release based on a promise to appear in court. Victims learn very quickly that if they do not speak up, the system can continue moving forward without them. And believe me, it favors the criminal, not the victim. I showed up to fight for my son, and what happened next told me exactly where victims stand in the system. Because parole is not just paperwork to us. Especially in DUI death cases, families often feel like they are being asked to trust the same system that failed to stop dangerous behavior before the tragedy happened that killed your child. That's the reality the victims live with. My son didn't get a second chance. My family, me, we don't get time back. Victims don't get parole from grief. That's why parole hearings become another battle families never expected to fight. For victims, the fear is not only about the past, it's about whether the system has truly learned from it. Please watch both videos in this series because what victims aren't told about probation and parole can change everything. Comment voice if you believe accountability should matter more than credits and checklists. Thank you.